A lot of people think a woman is too young if she gets pregnant at 20 years old. Some cases can be even more shocking if a mother becomes pregnant when she's a teenager. Cases like this are far too common, but it's not unusual for there to be true love behind teenage and young adult pregnancies. However, some of the cases in this video can be incredibly sad and traumatic for the young girls who were involved. That's because this video doesn't tell the story of teenagers, but rather the youngest girls in history to have gotten pregnant. Some of these cases can be quite shocking, but they're all confirmed to be true. Without further delay, here are the youngest mothers in the world. Before we dive in, be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. Patricia, the youngest mother in Germany. This case is super unusual, but thankfully it doesn't have the tragic backstory that some of these cases do. Patricia is a young girl from Germany. She was just 12 years old when she had her baby, and her family was shockingly supportive. Her age makes her the youngest mother in German history to have a successful pregnancy. Her boyfriend is only a few years older than her, and it seems like neither of them ever thought about using pregnancy prevention. After finding out she was pregnant, Patricia did her best to keep her secret from her parents. She didn't want them to be disappointed or angry with her, so she did her best to hide her pregnancy in any way she could. Though one day she was taken to the hospital when her family thought she was suffering from appendicitis. As it would turn out, she was going into labor. It wouldn't be long before her parents would learn the truth. Their beloved daughter had been carrying a child of her own for the last 9 months. Most families become outraged when learning this, but Patricia's family did their best to cope and support their daughter, as any loving family should. They're helping raise the young child while her mother continues going to school. Patricia says she plans to finish high school, and her boyfriend says he plans to do everything he can to take care of their new child. Cordeza, a Roma girl from Bulgaria. Cordeza is a young girl who lives in Bulgaria with her family. In this part of the world, it isn't uncommon for young girls to get married when they're very young. However, no one could have expected that an 11-year-old would give birth to a child. Most of the underage mothers in Bulgaria live in low-income communities. It is a tradition that as a young girl comes of age, she's allowed to be married as a teen. However, when Cordeza's stomach began to grow, she never thought that she could be pregnant. She had been in a relationship with a 19-year-old, but we don't know if this relationship was consensual or against her will. As her stomach began to grow, Cordeza assumed she was putting on weight and thought she may need to start a diet. But little did she know that her future was about to change forever. After her pregnancy became public, her boyfriend was punished for having a relationship with a minor. Even though the laws of this country allow young girls to marry when they're young, an 11-year-old girl was out of the question. We don't know how the man was punished, but after Cordeza gave birth, the baby was given to her grandparents. They're currently raising the child while Cordeza continues to live her childhood. Youngest birth in India. This case takes us to India. We don't know too much about this young girl, and her name has been kept private. The girl was 10 years old and was growing up in the city. When she was 9 and 10, she was forced against her will by her uncle on several occasions. We can assume that the uncle had no idea that the young girl was able to become pregnant, as he didn't make any attempt to prevent pregnancy. Before long, the girl began having serious pains that were caused by contractions. She was taken to the hospital, and the doctors found out that she was pregnant and had been for several months. To try to maintain the young girl's innocence, the doctors and her parents agreed to tell her that the pain was caused by a stone in her stomach. The girl believed this, but eventually her parents would be forced to tell her the truth. The original plan was for the girl to have surgery and have the fetus removed, even though the family signed off on this, as did the doctors. The courts would not allow the pregnancy to end. The girl had already been pregnant for more than 32 weeks, meaning it would have been illegal for them to remove the child. In the end, the girl was required to carry the baby to term and give birth through a C-section. We don't know if she ever found out that she was pregnant or if she continued to believe that there was a stone in her stomach. Thankfully, both she and the baby were just fine, though the baby was placed for adoption immediately afterward. The uncle was also sent to prison, and we don't expect him to ever be released for what he did to this poor girl. Mumzai from Nigeria. The story of Mumzai took place in Nigeria more than 100 years ago in 1884. Mumzai was a normal 8-year-old girl who lived on Calabar Island with her family. They were members of an exclusive tribe, and the tribe leader was known to have had many wives. It doesn't seem like he was very careful with who he chose as a wife, and many of his wives were very young, too young to be involved in such terrible activities. Mumzai would be chosen by the tribe leader and would become pregnant when she was just 8 years old. It is very unusual for a girl to become fertile at such a young age. So aside from the fact that the tribe leader had some serious issues, there was a lot of buzz around Mumzai's case. To make things even stranger, Mumzai's mother was a similar age when she gave birth. She was only 8 or 9 years old at the time as well. So this means that Mumzai's mother may be the youngest grandmother in world history. Thankfully, there were no complications with Mumzai's pregnancy, and we assume that both she and her child grew up to have normal lives. Daphne from Mexico. This case comes from Mexico. Daphne was just 8 years old and living with her family when tragedy struck. A 17-year-old boy took advantage of her youth, but thankfully, Daphne doesn't seem to remember what happened to her. Because of this, the police believe that the man likely carried out horrible acts against her will, possibly with the aid of chemicals to make the girl fall asleep. Police and the family searched for the young man, but he would never be found. It seems like the family knew exactly who caused this ordeal, but they were never able to find him. It's good that they know who the baby's father is, but it's terrible that they were unable to track him down and make him face punishment. The saving grace in this story is that Daphne was able to carry the child to term without any issues. The baby was born and was quite healthy, all things considered. Daphne was perfectly fine as well. The doctors don't expect Daphne to have any issues, but they want to keep a close eye on her as she develops over the next few years. If all goes well, she should be able to live a normal life. To this day, Daphne still does not remember what happened to her that led her into this situation. Yelizaveta from Ukraine. This case is incredibly dark and tragic and involves a 6-year-old girl from Ukraine. Yelizaveta, known by her family as Liza, was living a normal childhood until the fateful day that her grandfather forced her against her will. We don't know exactly how this happened, but her grandfather stole her innocence when she was just 5 years old, leaving Liza to give birth when she was just 6. The family didn't want the grandfather to be punished and didn't want to deal with the public ridicule that would follow, so they kept Liza's pregnancy a secret from everyone. Though they made the tragic mistake of not getting hospital workers involved when she went into labor. The family thought it would be best if they dealt with the pregnancy on their own, so Liza began to give birth in her family's home. Sadly, Liza would not make it through the pregnancy. She passed away. We don't know if her young child survived or not. But the family soon fled the city and, in a shocking twist, invited the girl's grandfather to come along with them. We don't know what happened to her family after this, but I certainly hope her grandfather was given the punishment he so desperately deserved. Lena from Peru. The case of young Lena from Peru is terribly tragic, but thankfully, Lena seems to have been taking her pregnancy quite well. Back in 1933, Lena was just 5 years old when she began to show signs of a tumor in her abdomen. Her parents were incredibly concerned, as the tumor seemed to be growing larger and larger with each passing day. Within 7 months, the tumor had grown so large that the family needed to take her to the emergency room. The doctors conducted a series of tests and did an X-ray of her abdomen, revealing that she was pregnant. There was no tumor, there was only a fetus. Lena continued to carry her son, but he was eventually removed from her body via a C-section. His birth weight was super low, but he managed to survive and is doing just fine now. The doctors working on Lena's case did a series of studies and tissue samples and found out that Lena was highly developed for someone of her age. Her family says that she had her first period when she was just 2 years old. Her sexual organs, bones, and hair had already progressed and looked like they belonged to an adult, but the doctors could not figure out what caused this strange situation. To make things even odder, Lena never revealed who the father of her baby was. Naturally, police assumed that her own father had forced Lena against her will, but Lena refused to explain what had happened. Since there was no evidence to use against him, the father was released. Though, by this point, the media was in a frenzy around Lena's case. Reporters were stationed outside of her hospital, leading police to stand guard so that the girl or child would not be hurt. People from across the globe offered to pay the girl's family if she agreed to show up to give speeches or show off her child. Her father agreed to have her showcased in a show in New York City, but the Peruvian government thankfully refused to let this happen. Lena was later examined by a child psychologist and was found to be highly advanced for her age. Though the psychologist says that Lena viewed her son as more of a brother. Because of this, the baby was asked to live with Lena's grandparents so that she could carry out a somewhat normal childhood. Later in life, Lena would marry and have another son and lived a normal life for the rest of her days. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more videos.